Welcome to Speak Up International with Rita Burke and Elton Brown. Today we have Majella Mark, and she is going to be reading an excerpt from her book, Cats Are Trash Human Beings: What I Learned About Feminism Through My Cats. Majella, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I promise it'll be a good one. Um, okay, so just a quick, passage from the book. In January 1988, a group of Israeli Jewish women called Women in Black held silent vigils, protests against the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Israel and Palestine were in their violent battle over territory, with instances of desperate violence by women like Afro-Palestinian guerrilla fighter Fatima Bernawi, who attempted to bomb a cinema in 1967. The Women in Black's vow of silence symbolized those lost in the crossfire over the years. Eventually, women from all over the world joined in, encouraging Israeli and Palestinian women to protest together in Jerusalem. Today, the full-fledged organization demonstrates with visuals all over Israel. In a sea of violence, women took a stand. Their silence was not out of intimidation or lack of words, but as a stance of peace. A visual, a time when a sleepless group engages in some type of mindfulness in a designated location. Silence, for many, is a sign of weakness, a restriction, or an oppressive result from those who have been muzzled by society, a community, or individual. The bondage of one's voice can be terrifying and defeating. Silence can also be a profound statement, a quiet tool to express the frustrations of a social justice issue that has pushed people to complete desperation for change. The notion that being a lady, fragile, and polite doesn't benefit anyone. Nothing would get done if this was the case. Yet throughout history, it was customary that women spoke little and behaved pleasantly, pretty much a level above a blow up doll. Even with the advancements of technology and globalization, many women are still not heard, bound by cultural practices, political satire, or simply bullying. But when silence is your circumstance, action can speak louder. That's it.
On Speak Up International, we seek community builders from all over the world to tell their stories. Today is no exception. And our guest is currently in a place that I love so dearly. It's Brooklyn, New York. Her name is Majella Mark, and she's a cultural strategist, filmmaker, and creative entrepreneur. Her work is grounded in the belief that culture is not decorative, instead, it is infrastructure. At the heart of Majella's practice is a commitment to making overlooked history visible and actionable. And it is certainly with delight and pleasure that I introduce our guest, Ms. Majella Mark, to continue to tell her very long and fascinating story. Welcome to Speaker International.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it dearly.
You are welcome. You come in with a smile on your face. It's like sunlight. So, this is going to really aid our conversation to be one that's going to be light and airy and a lot of bantering and question and answer. So, I want to know, since you started off by telling the stories or a story of others, in what ways have you seen storytelling help communities heal after a disruption or a disaster?
I think a lot of times when we see these disastrous moments in history, we see that women a lot of times are picking up the pieces. Um, if it is the aftermath of war, where mothers are pretty much gathering what is left, despite them sending their children off to do, violent or horrific things in the name of their country. I think a lot of times when we think about disasters like, you know, drought or hurricanes, a lot of time it's women who have to do what they need to do in order to protect the children. Um, and in the story I just shared, and again, I wrote this before, um, I wrote this before, hmm, before we have our current situation. And as I was reading, I was thinking, I wonder if women on both sides are still gathering in silence to pray together. Because that was a very bold and brave move that started decades ago, um, to show unification of two sides. And it was women who was trying to share that. As we now see in Gaza, we don't know what is left of that harmonious connection among women who has expressed their disapproval of the violence. And I think a lot of times we have to take that into consideration is a lot of these historical events are led by very few people and makes the rest of us very helpless. Our lives are being put on display like targets. And when we do try our best to find ways to express our frustrations, a lot of times is seen as a symbol of hope, but I guess only history can tell if that will actually subside. Um, these a lot of these historical experiences have been going on for decades and generations. And so it's hoping that when we teach the past in the present, that the future could then be saved.
Sounds like you're passionate about what people do and their contribution to history and ultimately the future. Now, in your bio, you call yourself a cultural strategist. So you call yourself a cultural strategist. Talk to us about that, please.
A cultural strategist is an individual who can possibly support the creative economy of a community. So what I do is a lot of times that I kind of get brought in for situations, um, to be able to help move a culture forward, specifically the culture that pertains to the African diaspora or the Black community. Um, I think examples of this is, for example, what I'm doing in Grenada. After Hurricane Beryl, I began the process of helping the rebuild of the museum. Again, trying to preserve a culture, trying to preserve the history of a people. And with that, I end up getting on the board. I end up being a project lead in this rebuild and fundraising. And that's kind of the work I'm doing is how do we create a space or strategy to preserve not only a history, but a culture. Now, what I mean by culture is, for example, for the African diaspora, is a very diverse community where you have individuals who, again, even though the boat all came from the same place. It just landed in different places. And with that, the different communities, due to geographical locations, grasp onto as much of their African ancestry practices as they could based off the surroundings they had, right? So you see there's similar cuisines that are made, but with different ingredients. There are similar practices of how we conduct weddings or how we go ahead and celebrate birthdays or how do we conduct funerals. And we see the common denominator within that community, but we know that it's getting erased as we go from one generation to the next. So it's like, how do we make sure that we, without the pressure of thinking that we cannot evolve as human beings, but how do we make sure that we protect those practices? How do we protect the literature? How do we maintain a lot of the stories? So one of the big ways I do that is through oral histories, is making sure that the everyday person, the everyday person actually have an opportunity to share their lives and share it in a way where hopefully in the future people could look back or hear those who spoke about their lives and be able to understand, oh, this is how they used to speak, or these are words that I haven't heard for a long time, or the way that we say certain things and we move our faces or we use our hand gestures. Is how do we preserve our history as much as we possibly can as we move on throughout the years? Because, like everything, sometimes history itself gets revised or edited. And so it's about protecting the truths and the authenticities of a society that a lot of times have been taken advantage of or has its narrative told for them. So that's what I mean by being a cultural strategist, is trying to figure out the best ways possible to preserve history, to preserve cultures, to be able to help give confidence to the people to be able to do what they need to do for themselves to preserve their own legacies and their histories. And it could be through many ways, if it's film, if it's podcasts, if it's books, if it's exhibitions, if it is just overall practices that is then be able to be maintained, and individuals are able to go ahead and have ownership of their identities. So it's really just a sense of having um, kind of a person that can help facilitate these practices of preservation for our people.
Okay, so we're talking about preserving our history, finding ways to do that. And you mentioned several platforms, and I think that was excellent, at least in my in my book. So, but what does it mean in practice to treat memory as a living resource and rather than a static archive?
So I think what that means is a lot of times we have this intergenerational separation. And I always tell young people, like, listen to your elders' stories because you'd be surprised how similar their teenage years were. You'd be surprised what they went through. And it's also a means of um, making sure that that history is not lost, even if it's for an individual family. It's very interesting where we all have family lores and, these type of stories or quote unquote secrets of the families, and you don't understand where they come from. But if you were to have instances where generations actually spoke to each other, actually opened up, actually had an understanding of who they were as a person, and in reflection, understand how that then brought about the next generation of your family and the way they actually act and behave, and having a better grand scheme of a system put in place where you know that your legacy is not just the house you have or the money that you can have your children inherit. It's knowing that they know where they come from the best way you possibly can. Because again, we don't know our tribes. We don't really know where we came from. So we have to be able to grasp onto as much as our story as possible in order to then hopefully the next generation with the technology we have today, maybe they could then return to the original tribes, or because, as the diaspora, we're all mixed up, to the multiple tribes that they may be bloodline connected to, and then be able to tell, like, this was my family story. It's back in Africa to those tribes, and like this is what your own people had endured abroad, and then be able to go ahead and create this kind of sense of information system of understanding within us as Black people, especially um, as we see that we are all kind of here having the same experiences, learning the same things, or having some at least some kind of common, you know, denominator, some kind of common thread. Um, and making sure that with that we document it properly. Because again, especially where we don't know with the political climate, more and more things are being erased. I've noticed things that was on, and I just hopefully we could keep it. The things that was in the Library of Congress, videos, photographs that you should be able to find in the Library of Congress, and is no longer there, or I cannot find them. So I'm very grateful. And I know I'll say this. I'm grateful that I was got a chance to look at it or to be able to actually download it before it just disappeared. Um, I don't know who's gonna come for me after this episode, but who's gonna like things that seem to have just disappeared, and have access to it. And then is the question is, how do we then protect it from here? Right? Our photographs, our letters from our relatives, our videos, films. I have like two films from the 1960s where I cannot find them online. Like I cannot I can no longer find them. And I'm assuming maybe I'm just tired, but I can't. I tried for 2 days trying to figure out where did these two videos gone. And it's just in my hard drive. So we'll see um how that works. But I think a lot of times where we as individuals who are Black archivists or historians is less about just, oh, how do we share a story or how do we, retell a story. It's about how do we save a story? How do we save it? Because you don't know when it'll be taken away from you. Again, we lost our language, we lost our names, we lost where we came from. And in 2026, you see that there is new tactics of erasure. Um, so I think it's very important that as we move forward, there needs to be more people who are just taking the time. When you have those family reunions or those cookouts or those barbecues, take time for people to write their story down. It could be one or two designated relatives where their whole job is during a family gathering. It's like, I don't care, stop what you're doing, put the beer down, put the wings down. We got to, no, seriously, we need to sit down and tell me everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the monstrous. It is our truth. It's our truth, and we should have it documented, and we should have an understanding of who we are, where do we come from, and the best we can. And it's really it's I won't say it's a war, but I would say it is definitely have become a battle of preserving our identity from the past and the present, and then hopefully the future could keep on going.
You said a lot of things, Majella, that resonate with me. But the one that I find most inspiring so far is put the beer down, put the wings down. I think that's interesting. But you've also said the culture is not decorated. What exactly does that mean?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? The country's not what?
You said the culture is not decorated.
Um, the culture is not decorated. What did I mean by that? Well,
Decorative.
decorations.
Yes.
Oh, yes. What I mean by that is that it just can't be on the surface. Like this is not just because like celebrating here, me being Caribbean, as I say in the sense of when we're allowing individuals to come into a space to celebrate Carnival, a lot of times they don't understand why they're putting on costumes and they're marching down the street and they're having a good time. I know the same thing with Juneteenth is okay, having an understanding of Juneteenth and celebrating it. It needs to be an understanding of why we're doing it. Why are we having barbecues? Why is, you know, Uncle Joe over there, he's putting up these flags and what have you. Is why are we celebrating? For Carnival specifically, in my case, for my roots and the Caribbean roots, it's while people are celebrating and are having a good time, it is not meant to just be this mundane kind of excuse for a party. We have to teach that the whole point of Carnival was a rebellion. It was a sense of showcasing a mockery of the slaveholders, right? It is meant to be a celebration of emancipation for our freedom from slavery. I think as we go on, we'll one generation after another, we forget that. We forget. We're thinking we're just going to fly to Trinidad, or we're just going to go ahead and pack in our, our bottles and put on our sneakers and put on our costumes and we're going to have a good time. And we have to make sure that we understand that the reason why we're doing these things is in celebration of the ancestors who did sacrifice their lives, right? To make sure that when we're thinking about culture, yes, something as simple as braids. Yes, we're celebrating braids, but do we understand why we're so protective of it? So then when we're able to go ahead and confront someone who wants to argue about, oh, well, everyone should be able to, yeah, but you have to have the information and the confidence to be able to express exactly why it's a concern. It can't just be like, because I don't feel comfortable with you. A lot of times we do things with emotions, which is fine. We're human beings. But a lot of times we need to be educated on our own identity and our history in order to then be able to approach somebody who's trying to make not, I won't say just a mockery of it, but trying to downplay our feelings of why we're offended. If you do not know and you cannot clearly argue why you're offended when a white person is trying to say the N-word, or why they're trying to do certain behaviors or change up their accent to when they're talking to you, or if you're not able to intelligently express your concerns and actually have information, and me, having 10 years working in data is and be able to have even data points to be able to express exactly why it's offensive. They're going to just take it as, oh, they're just emotional and they need to get over it. It's like, no, you can't just talk about Tulsa. You have to understand every single place that this has happened to in the United States that are just downplayed
Hmm.
compared to Tulsa, because it was Tulsa that people keep on talking about. We have to go ahead and mention not just IDB Wells, we have to mention all the other individuals who also helped. We have people who walked with Martin Luther King, who we probably don't even know of, people who probably served food to him and we don't know of. One of the things, I'll give an example of why culture should not be, decorative. So, for example, I'm working on a film in Connecticut. Now, right now, Connecticut was one of the biggest crop shareholder crop I can't explain it right now, but they were they had the market, they were dominant for tobacco. Now, we celebrate these things where we have Black people who are celebrating, independence, who are celebrating Black History Month. They celebrate Martin Luther King all the time, but there's a lot more to Martin Luther King than just I had a dream speech or him walking in Selma, right? The history I'm teaching is him when he was in college at Morehouse and how he went up to Connecticut during his summers to make funds to actually pick tobacco. And he was picking tobacco by Jamaicans, by Puerto Ricans, by other people of color. And so when we think about these places, like these liberal places like Connecticut, and think, oh, well, they're a blue state. We're not as blue as people think, right? And we teach the history of like that people was really, even after slavery, during the civil rights movement, before what actually helped inspire Martin Luther King Jr., see the treatment of Black people, not just those who are ADOS, who are, American, descendants of slaves here in the United States, but who are also of the Caribbean, of the other parts of the world, who also have faced injustices. And it can't just be, oh, well, we're going to go ahead and just celebrate with some, like a dance, or we're going to go ahead and just wave some flags and thinking, yeah, we're doing our part.
Hmm.
No, even as Black people, we have to be very not only protect it, but we have to be very conscious of how we are able to articulate and explain our culture so that no one could go ahead and make a mockery of it.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned about the film that you're making, so a documentary. So this documentary uh, challenges, I'm assuming, dominant narratives about the Caribbean and about the African diaspora. Can you expand on that in terms of what does that mean to you? And is this the and what type of message are you trying to deliver based on the Caribbean and the African diaspora?
What I'm hoping that this documentary showcase, because the purpose of this documentary was to highlight the systematic and, injustices that was faced by people of color, especially those who were immigrants during the pandemic, right? When other school districts had laptops and they had access to everything they need very quickly, right? So So I think what's really important is when we're teaching the history of Connecticut, we have to keep in mind that this is not the first time that Connecticut has shown um, systematic, you know, systematic unfairness and systematic injustices among Black people specifically. I express in the documentary not only what happened during the pandemic, where a lot of students had a disadvantage and people kind of fended for themselves for quite a long time, but also throughout history, what happened. Like I mentioned before, Martin Luther King, he actually did a speech in 1959 expressing that same concern about quote unquote liberal states and how, yes, and you might have the laws and books, but you need to have people who's going to go ahead and make sure that they stay accountable by following those laws. Right. So, especially, and the best way I could express this is what I think throughout his speech he was saying is that just because you have like a sign on your front lawn that says Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that it equals out when you're clutching onto your purse in an elevator when a Black man walks in.
Hmm.
Okay.
What story? What an image! What an image! Black Lives Matter. But you're still clutching on to your purse when a black person walks in. That created quite a concrete image in my mind. Now, talk to us about your connection to Hurricane Beryl, please.
So 2024, I was in Grenada with my sister, and we happened to stumble into a hurricane. Hurricane Beryl was a Category 4 or 5 hurricane that really did a number on the smaller islands, Carriacou and Pitney. And of course, one of the first things that I was thinking about after the storm passed was what happened to the people itself. Hope everyone's okay. I know people are pretty much devastated for the damage that they face, but not, and again, I didn't know how severe it was at the time. But then I was thinking about the overall museums. And of course, me being that person, the history buff, I was thinking, oh, the artifacts, the documents, what happened to them. So of course, once I got a view of the damage that occurred to the Carriacou Museum specifically, at that point, I realized a lot of our artifacts has been destroyed because there wasn't infrastructure or resources to protect them. A lot of things were just put in boxes. A lot of things were just set in people's homes. Uh, right now, we're very grateful that we have a container to be able to store the items as we continue to work to rebuild the museum. But that was where my mind went. I started out was just thinking I was going to send some emails and maybe do some fundraising. And then it turned into, well, you seem to know what you're doing. It snowballed into me attending like conferences regarding sustainable issues with small islands and focusing primarily on the preservation of our history. I end up speaking in Washington, D.C. I end up being very grateful to be able to actually work under for a fellowship under uh Zora Neale Hurston's niece, Lucianne Hurston, for a fellowship, uh, speaking on how to best do research in a way that is going to be able to make sure that people are feel engaged and feel supported. I think is really important as I move forward with, especially this museum, is uh, thinking about how do we not only protect our stuff, right? Um, as from natural disasters, but how do we also protect it from vandalism? How do we protect it from exploitation? I think a lot of times we don't take that into consideration is what can be put in play when your institutions are being threatened. And it's unfortunate because I see now with the Smithsonian in DC, where a beautiful feat of having African American history in one building to be able to teach the world. And even that is being threatened. And where do we go from there? It's very important that we continue to do what is necessary to make sure that we have the space and the resources and the harmony as a people to move forward. Um, yeah, I'm looking forward to rebuilding it because I'm not rebuilding the museum for the sake of uh myself because I'm already thinking in the sense of being an ancestor, and I know that might sound morbid, but I have to think about it that way. Is when I'm doing my work, I have to think, the 10-year-old, how are they going to see the space? Do they feel welcome? Do they see themselves in the space? When they're looking at books, when they're looking at, exhibitions, do they see themselves? Do they feel a sense of pride and confidence to take the baton and to keep moving forward?
I think this is the ultimate question. How are the youth and local residents around the museum participating in the museum's future?
So I think now, specifically with the Carriacou Museum, we are making it very youth friendly. We are in the process of trying to connect with the school system to make it, I won't say mandatory, but encourage that each student at least visit the museum at least once as a school trip, reminding them of their history. Again, we're talking about a country that is predominantly Black. So it's a bit easier to be able to justify the need to be able to preserve and to have the youth identify their history and their identity as a people. Now, I would love to see that practice, and I'm talking with different individuals who are archivists and museum directors who's like, how do we make sure that the youth see themselves and again, bless them, but they have a short attention span. They have a short attention span. So you have to find creative ways, especially with the youth, to get them interested in history. It's like, how do you teach it through an anime or through games or through physical exercises that they can do and gather information and kind of see themselves. Um, and so really is just creating space for them to see themselves in the institution itself. And with that, um, making sure that you're building it for the future. So, for example, for the museum itself, we're looking into, creating the overall floor plan where young people feel comfortable just hanging out there. Like they want like just to hang out there. So as they're trying to, eat their, I don't know, their chips and their little juice or what have you, they're surrounded by the information of their ancestors. They might actually take the time to want to read one of the books or look at a video. I think, then you start adding all the technology stuff. It's like how do you do all that thinking ahead? I think one of the concerns we also have is the same way how vinyl end up turning into CDs, or vinyl turn into cassette tapes that then turn into CDs that then turn into MP3s. It's just that we don't know what the next thing is going to be. So then when we're thinking about preserving history with scanning documents, with music, with, you know, actual artifacts, we're thinking, well, what is going to be the technology in the next 50 years? And are the people then, because, you know, at that point, I'll be an elder, God willing. I'll just be sitting down and trying to just tell people what to do. But at that point, we don't know how we're going to transfer information to that new technology that we don't know exists yet. So then we need the youth, right? We need the youth to have that mind and that commitment. Because again, they might just say like, "Oh, it doesn't matter." We have to make them care about it. We have to make them care about it because they're going to be the guardians of it. And so as technology change, um, you hope that there's a few individuals who will then take up, you know, that, you know, mantle and actually be like, okay, I know I'll figure out how to make sure that I can push this for another 50 years, you know?
You talked about what technology will be in the next 50 years. I say what will technology be in the next 5 years because that's how fast it's changing. We're talking with Majella Mark, and as you know, in Speak Up International, we seek to inform, inspire, and educate, and this is exactly what's happening on Speak Up International today. I want to throw a word out at you, and I want you to respond to that word, tattoo.
Tattoo. Yes. Um, I guess we're speaking about the tattoo I have by Jackie Grayson
The
and
plane, the plane.
how I kind of took a significant amount of effort to get this tattoo. Um, I think the reason why I have this tattoo is because I think a lot of times we end up celebrating people after they pass on. Um, and for me personally, I I don't geek out off of celebrities and music artists. I geek out of everyday people who are I'm like, wow, like you're actually alive. You know, we will be reading about you in history books and you're here now. So maybe we should embrace that you're here now and give them their flowers now, right? Um with Jackie Gresham, I was made aware of her. I forgot how. I think again during the pandemic I was reading everything. So I happened to stumbled upon this woman and understand that she has a degree in architecture and without because her lack of work she could find back then in the 19, you know, 60s, 70s, she decided to open a tattoo shop and she is recognized at the African American tattoo artist in the United States, right? And not only that, she ran she ran the longest running tattoo shop in New Orleans. And I'm very grateful. She actually shut down the place maybe a year after I got my tattoo. Because again, even when I was getting the tattoo, and I'm very proud of this tattoo. It's actually of the chemical compound of melanin were branches of nutmeg, being Grenadian. And I even have the sketch she created signed, you know, and I have it framed. And she gave me a Jesus t-shirt, tie-dye Jesus t-shirt. And so I go to sleep with that, and I'm very excited to have that. And the whole time she's saying, you know, I'm 75. Why do you want me to tattoo you? Like, because you're Jackie Gresham, you're history, you're living history, you're here now. And I think she thought it was adorable that I was fangirling over her because she just was like, girl, it's like, I'm usually in my house. And she started, I think she was talking about a can collection. And she said, this is what I'm doing with my time now. It's like, there's no need for it. But I wanted people to know who she was. So I wrote about her. I went on social media, was expressing like, hello, like everybody, we need to like embrace this person. Um, and from my understanding, now she's touring in different tattoo conventions and conferences and people are interviewing her. And there's a children's book inspired by her now. And yes, and it's just amazing to see how people are celebrating her as she's here now. And I want her to live like many years, many, many, many more years. Um, and I want her to be able to make sure that, she's celebrated and she's enjoying people embracing and celebrating her now, because I think it's something that we need to really do more of. Um, and I hope we do. I really hope we do. Um, sorry, because I really think it's necessary. I think it's really necessary to make sure that we uh share history that is not only going to hmm, share history is not only going to teach us something, but give us the confidence we need that we too can also do amazing things, and we can be the first in anything. She was the first in tattoos, and somebody else could be the first in whatever else comes next, you know?
I want to go back to those chicken wings. I'm so hungry. And when you mentioned the chicken wings, my mouth just watered. It's like, oh, yeah. Yes, that's exactly what I need. I need chicken wings. Oh, so while we're so I might as well get my question. I've already started it, so I might as well finish it. Are you a good cook? If not, what do you like to eat?
I feel like I cook well enough. Um, I think being the oldest, the oldest daughter, all that stuff, I had no other option but to cook. I think one of my favorite things to eat is salmon, and I love seafood. So I definitely do enjoy. I'm getting much better. One thing I really need to get better at is making a steak. I don't think I'm the best at a steak. And I'm trying to look at like books and YouTube videos. And I'm trying to like I want to make a good steak because I think that's the heart of this, right? It's usually the stomach, right? That's what it is. Like the heart of it is the stomach. So I was like, I need to learn how to make a good steak. And so I've been practicing like, okay, my little pieces, I'm just like, all right, what is this? How do I make sure that the outside is crispy and then the inside is well enough where you can slice it? I'm trying to get better at it because I do enjoy good steak.
Have you thought?
I,
Have you thought about writing a book about it?
I need to, you know what? It'd be interesting. Somebody must have like some book on it. It'd be interesting the history. I have most of my cookbooks too is like history cookbooks of like it's absolutely fascinating when you hear about how gumbo came about or how did the Gullah Geechee and their cuisine came about and realizing how similar we all are. Was one person called yams, we call something else, and dashing it's just amazing to see how we all eat the same thing in just different ways and we still compete in who's tastes the best and and when it comes to cuisine, especially with Black folks, doesn't matter where you are in the world. We all got the best potato salad. We all got the best turkey wings. We all got the best. We all got the best jollof rice. We all got the best jambalaya.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about my mama? You trying to say my mama can't
Right,
cook?
right.
We
It's
all got
exactly
the best rice and peas. We
right.
all got the best oxtail. I want to go back to ask a question that I wanted to ask, a statement you made even before we started recording, because it still is resonating with me. I find it very powerful. You said silence could be a quiet tool. Expand on that statement. Please.
I am a woman who does not like to argue. I am personally I use it as a tool, the silent treatment, personally, where it works best for me. But I think a lot of times where we say silence is a tool, I think the best example right now is the state the United States is in right now. And I say that because if we remember the election, um, after the election and we saw the results, I think it was like the 92%. The 92% of women voted against our current administration. And there was this kind of universal agreement that it didn't even have to be said, but we just all knew like we're all resting. We're not going out in the streets to protest. We're not, we're not going to go ahead and get, angry when people try to rage bait us with racial slurs or something. It's like we are literally, it's like we're staying out of the streets because that's what they want. They want us to see us act uncivilized, quote unquote, where really it's just us being rebellious and fighting for our justice, but what they consider being uncivilized. And so right now, this sense of silence is frustrating a lot of other groups. So I say that because in the last year or two, where we've had these protests even against ICE, or, people are expressing their frustrations, they're all like, where's the Black women? You guys are not saying anything. You guys are not in the streets marching with us. And I think they forget that it was said and expressed at the beginning, if you vote this way again, we're done. We're done.
But you see a lot of that on if you happen to scan Facebook. There are a lot of Black channels, and they emphasize that Black women are staying home, they're doing their hair, their nails. They are not going out protesting with all these other people who voted for the very person that we told them not to vote and for that person, and the reason why, but they did it anyway because, well, probably some of them, not all of them, but a lot of them did it out of hate why they voted for this man, as opposed to voting for this Black woman who gave us a forecast if this man gets in, and now, well, there we have it. Or as Canadians say, and Bob's your uncle. When you are telling your stories to your audience, how interactive are you with your audience? Do you say, "Wake up, wake up, pay attention"? I didn't come all the way down here for just for you to fall asleep while I'm telling you something that's life changing. So how do you keep it lively and them wanting to ask for more?
So I try to find creative ways to be able to teach history. If it's through the the medium of art and painting, or it's just through literature. I think again, it depends on the group. So for example, I knew with the teaching of the history of feminism, I have a coloring book for the children versus the adults get like, this more adult type of book with illustrations of cats, which is strange versus adolescents will have a different medium. I think a lot of times we take for granted what information we have and don't understand that we should be embracing it and understanding it and registering it. So you have to entertain people, basically. You have to find ways to entertain them. If it's through interactive, like exhibitions. Like, for example, I'm trying to put together a connection, a history about indigo and how it's connected through Africa, the Gullah Geechee in the United States, in the Caribbean, in Grenada specifically, in Carriacou specifically. And so I might have to teach that through like planting a whole bunch of indigo all over the place, or having to, I don't know, build a garden and then have people walk through the garden, or have to create a clothing line with denim and that somehow would teach history. I mean, there's so many different ways you can teach history. Especially with youth, you have to meet them where they are. I think that's really important. And so it might be like, oh, we're gonna teach sirens. So we're gonna teach, the history of a specific people through t-shirts and make the t-shirts cool. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that so and so did X, Y, and Z. Who is this person? Like, oh, I didn't know about, Malcolm X and this history of how he was as a teenager. I think we need to have different ways of connecting with people, that is just not just the traditional in the classroom or in a museum or like in a book. I think a lot of times we forget that, especially with this day and age with social media, it's so quick that you have to find creative ways to catch people's attention, especially when they have access to misinformation. And so with them, a lot of times that's one thing that really makes me nervous is the misinformation where you end up believe I so there's a influencer, a streamer, I think his name is Ice Speed or something, and I think I spoke to you about the Mr. Brown about this before. And he went to Africa. He did a whole tour in Africa. And the response from this kid, I think he's from like Detroit or something. This response of this kid live streaming the cultures, the different cultures in Africa, the different things he did. Like, he did like, martial arts and cars and all these different things. The response people had on social media, some of them were in tears. They said, I didn't know Africa was like this. They made us afraid of Africa. And this is a kid, I know he's at least 10 years younger than me. Okay. And he took his platform of him, jumping over cars and doing what he does, right? And he was able to showcase a continent that many have been gatekeeping and providing information misinformation about for so long, especially to the diaspora, that now people's eyes open and they feel shattered. They feel emotionally shattered because they're thinking like, I did not know Africa looked like this. I did not know when people said they were returning. I was thinking, you're stupid, not realizing that they do have an option. And I tell, especially my ADOS friends, that you do have an option. You can come to the Caribbean too. We're all cousins. You can come to the Caribbean. But to say that you don't have an option, mind you, yes, you should fight. Your ancestors fought in the United States. They fought to be here. Many of them was able to go ahead and escape to Canada. Many of them was able to escape to Mexico. And you have every right to fight for your right to be here. Absolutely. But there has to also be an understanding that you also have an option if you want it. You do have an option to go, quote unquote, go home if you like, return. And it's I think we're getting, and especially younger generations they're a bit more like global citizens in a sense of
Mhm.
they're open to having these conversations. They're open to having these connections and having an understanding of this cultural exchange, especially. Like you have like everybody within the diaspora. They're listening to Afro beats, they're listening to soca music, they're listening to hip hop, listening to trap music. I laugh and I express to my friends how you could take my cousins in Grenada, you could put them right in Atlanta, Georgia, with their locks. You could put some go, you could not tell the difference. You would not be able to know they're not from Atlanta. I they have the same nicknames like Kai Kai and in case it's I mean, we all the same.
Well,
And so sorry.
I think it is wonderful that we continue to have these conversations where we get to talk about the similarities. We were doing that earlier when we were talking about food. And, even though we may call it one thing and another group of us may call it something else, if put us all at the same table, we wouldn't know the difference. You may call it something else. We call it greens. We call it grits. Don't know what you call it, but whatever it is, I know it's good, and I'm going to eat it. That's just like food from Africa. Uh, and they have tons of restaurants here
Mm,
in Canada, Toronto area, GTA, where you can find wonderful uh, collections of food from different countries. And so that really does help tie individuals together,
Mm.
because all of a sudden you see people that you maybe were passing by in the street, but now you see them eating at a table next to you. So you're going to remember that person because, indirectly you actually had a meal with this person. So it
Yeah.
really does make things really good. So I want to thank you for joining us today, Majella. And your book, I think, is going to definitely sit in the homes of many, many people. Yay, cats and all.
Yay, cats
Uh,
and all. Thank you.
so where can your book be found?
So you can find my book on like Barnes and Nobles, bookshop.org, Strat. You can find it online. I'm sure if you Google it, it's probably the only one that will probably pop up. Um, yeah, and I'm in the process of because it just launched, so I'm in the process of getting into bookstores as well.
Mhm.
But I think online is probably the best bet, and I think it'd be exciting to be able to see, different people reading the book from different, backgrounds and demographics, and just I don't know.
Before we say goodbye, there is one thing that you and Rita have in common. Both of you has written books that have coloring books that go with the book. So you
Oh
guys
my God,
definitely have something in common. And Rita's
Rita,
book uh, title is "I Like Being Me."
I love that. I like being me. Yes. Yes, I love that. We need more of that. We need more of that.
Okay, well, I think we should probably end this.
Okay.
And I want to say before we go, it's so important that we gather these stories. If we don't, we're going to wind up with nothing. And then when we're trying to figure out where we come from or where we are going, we're not going to have a map. So if everyone can make sure that when they're sitting at the kitchen table, as Rita said, that we talk about these stories, tell the stories, even if the story has been altered, because a lot of our stories, they get blown up. Like, I don't know about you, but my dad used to tell me this story about going to school. So at first it started off with, oh yeah, well, every morning, I had to walk to school 5 miles to get there and then 5 miles to get back. Well, then, about a month later, he tell the story. Now it's 10 miles going back and forth. And I remember I got popped in the mouth because I said, but you said that was 5 miles. Now all of a sudden it's 10 miles. I got popped in the mouth of that. But it's really, really important that our stories are told. And before we go, Rita, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, I would like to say to Majella Mark, thanks for reminding me that our history is very important. Thanks for reminding me that we're all families, just that the boat landed in different places. Thanks for reminding me that we have to be mindful about preserving our stories from generation to generation. Thank you. It's been a treat.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor. I enjoy this. You guys are fun. And I truly am grateful to be able to, I don't know, share what I'm doing. I know people might think it's some kind of weird fixation, but
No, no,
I,
we're not thinking that at all. If that was the case, then we wouldn't be talking, right? I would say, oh, that woman was weird. She's weird, really weird. No. Thank you for tuning in to Speak Up Exclamation Point International. If you wish to contact our guest, Ms. Majella Mark, please be prepared to submit your name, your email address, and the reason why you wish to contact Ms. Mark at www.majellamark.com. Ms. Majella Mark has other social media accounts you can use to connect to her that will be listed in the description section on Spotify and other social media platforms. Your voice has the power to inspire, to influence, and ignite change. We'd love to hear your story. We invite you to connect to us by sending a message that includes your name, company, or organization name, the valuable service you offer to your community, and your email address to info@speakuppodcast.ca. You can also find our new video podcast channel at bit.ly// Speak Up Podcast video. You can find our audio podcast at www.speakuppodcast.ca. Our logo has the woman with her finger pointing up, mouth open, speaking up. As soon as the website passes inspection, you will be able to gain access to the audio and video versions of each podcast using the following link, www.speakuppodcast.ca. As a member of our Patreon group, you will gain access to a wide range of exciting benefits. We are working on providing you with early access to episodes, the opportunities to suggest topics or guests for future episodes. Your contribution of $2 or $5 monthly will not only help sustain the continuity of the podcast, but also allow us to enhance the overall listening experience for all of our dedicated followers. Help us help you. www.patreon.com. Don't miss our next episode. Join us again on Speak Up International, where we aim to inspire, to inform, educate, and entertain you.